The comments heard on The View From A Pew are those of Mac McCoy and are not necessarily the opinions of his guests, his producer Garth, any one particular denomination or religion, the church lady, Mr. Lemke, Pastor Craig, or anyone else of sound mind and body. Now, here is today's The View From A Pew, heard all around the world on YouTube. Just search for The View From A Pew.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Mac McCoy, and welcome to this edition of The View From A Pew. We've got a couple things going on today. First of all, and you're saying, Mac, you've had this name for this show for 20 years. You mean you finally got an email? Yes, I did. So you could now email me at mac@theviewfromapew.com, and I would really like to hear from you on ideas for topics, ideas for, you might have questions about some things. I'd love to hear from you. And unlike other people, I'm the only one that has access to my emails. So they don't go through a secretary or an assistant or anybody else, and nobody else has access to this email. So you could even put something in there rather personal, and I will never say anybody's name on the radio or tell a story unless I have your permission. Now, the other thing, this will be the third time you and I have been on together, or fourth? Fifth?
Might be.
Okay. Steve Arts is one of my new hosts. I don't call him a guest anymore. I call him a host. And Steve comes up with most of the top, well, so far 100% of the topics we talk about when he's on the radio or when he's on this program. And Steve is a very good writer. And so how I know what we're going to talk about is he'll send me a letter talking about what the topic is today. And if you want to read that letter, it's posted on my Facebook page, and it has as a headline, Atheism on Trial, 9/9/25. And you have 5 interesting questions that you ask at the top. By the way, welcome. Thanks for being here.
I was glad you acknowledged my being here because I wasn't sure if I was.
Yeah, well, I was going to actually try to talk. I was going to use this voice for Steve.
Well, I thought you were going to just treat me like an existentialist, and then it would be kind of a remote thing.
I don't know what that word means.
I'm not sure either, but it sounded good.
It did. What was the word we came up with last week that sounded so good? Unilateral? No.
Ubiquitous.
Ubiquitous, yeah.
Which is actually a word.
But I don't know what it means.
It means like really present everywhere.
Okay. Like God.
Like God, yeah, he's ubiquitous.
Okay. So you start out with 5 questions, and I think this is good. And this is not a short writing. So if you come in and read it or follow it, if you jump on Facebook and you could do watching the program at the same time you look at this by just simply opening another tab in your on your computer and have one where the show's being broadcast and having one where the letter is. But you start out with these 5 questions. What do some famous atheists say? 2, is materialism a form of atheism? 3, what do some notable previous atheists say? 4, what do some prominent believers say? And then you wrap it up with, what can we conclude? And you really did your research on this. You're amazing. You went through and found all these different atheists and kind of gave us a written on the back of a matchbook type of answer. And the one you start out with, of course, is probably the most well-known atheist.
One of them.
And that's Darwin. So talk to us a little bit about Darwin and what did he feel about being an atheist?
I want to back up a little bit. The reason the title is Atheism on Trial, and I have that picture of, like banging the thing, at the court, the gavel, is because it seems like Christianity's always on trial. It's like we have to prove everything. We're the ones that are goofy, on and on. Well, I'm tired of that. And so I wanted to be assertive and say, wait a minute, let's put you on trial. You prove you've got something going. So anyway, so we're going to first, when you do it, anytime you talk with anybody, you got to meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I would also welcome any atheist who would like to come on this show, and you will be treated like my guest at home. We are not here to put you down. We would just like to hear from you why you have chosen to not believe in any higher power, I guess. And in our case, it's God and the Trinity. So you're always welcome in here. Studios in Omaha, Nebraska. All right, go ahead.
Well, okay, so Darwin's claim to fame basically is that there are no purposes. Now, that means something. He was big into believing there were causes, which comes to haunt him later, because if there's a cause, what's the cause then? But no purposes leaves you kind of empty. And but think about it this way. Going back to, if you take Darwin and you bring it up to the current time, there's an atheist that's quite famous, atheist Harari. And in his,
is he Indian?
I don't know for sure. I try
Okay.
not to get into nationalities,
Okay.
Did I ever ask you your nationality, Mac?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, well, I apologize for that. That's
I recognize myself as a female gender horse. Or
now,
bull.
for those of you that might know him or don't, that actually could be true. But aside from that, what this fella is, he went to the World Economic Forum, and he's a scientist, right? And he says that the 21st century science will soon replace evolution by natural selection, by the evolution versus intelligent design, not the intelligent design of God above the clouds, but our intelligent design and the intelligent design of our clouds. Now, the whole bunch.
Are you talking about AI?
Yeah. And so what he's saying, he's making AI God, basically. Now, Darwin made biology God. Okay.
Yes.
So my point is, and I'm not critical of any atheist that might think along these lines, except that it's saying much the same thing. And that's why I'm bringing it out. Now, there's another guy that's really famous, and his name is Richard Dawkins.
Yep.
And he's a Darwinian biologist.
Yes.
So he wrote a book, River Out of Eden, and he says basically that
River Out of Eden.
River Out of Eden. Yeah, I mean, kind of a mockery, really, because he's saying the universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. Doesn't that sound super? I mean, what a place we have. So that's how he's seeing Darwinian evolution evolving into this, and that we're going to be, it's basically serves no purpose again.
Wasn't it Dawkins that couldn't speak at the end of his life, and so he was in a wheelchair and he had a machine that would speak for him, and that was his quote-unquote artificial intelligence? Or was...
I don't know.
Okay.
You may be suffering from delusion, because I don't recall that, but it's possible.
And didn't Dawkins come to the Lord right before his death?
Well, obviously Mac has done his homework.
No.
Or possibly not.
Yeah, I didn't do my homework. I'm sorry, I'm not that good. But I just remember a voice that sounded like this, and that was Mr. Dawkins talking. That was somebody. I don't know who.
I don't know who that was. Maybe, I mentioned delusion. There's a reason for that. I wasn't trying to be personal, derogatory, but rather Dawkins wrote a book called The God Delusion,
Yes.
which says enough right there. But he says that he sees God, and I'm quoting, arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction, jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethic cleanser, a misogynist, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megafascial, sadomasochistic,
You wrote this. You ought to be able
capriciously
to pronounce
malevolent bully. I should have practiced. But my gosh, I can't think of anybody that could. I mean, wow, that's how you could come up with that. I don't know, but I mean, that's so. What I see here, at least in some of this, is that it goes beyond not believing in something. it goes into hating something,
Yeah.
which in effect, how do you hate something if it's nothing to begin with? It seems to lack logic or reason. That's just my opinion, comment for what it's worth. But somehow it just seems void of any meaning, which
Well,
he's saying life is anyway.
and that's the thing that I have always found so interesting. Um, uh, I don't mind atheists, and I also don't try to evangelize with them. But I have, over the years, had several atheists on the radio with me and trying for me to understand why they don't fill that natural hole that God puts in all of us that is to be filled with Him. Why do they choose to fill it with a different belief? If they don't believe in God, then they don't need to say all those things about Him.
No, I agree with you. Really, Darwin is probably a true, what I would call a pure atheist, in the sense that he says there's no seemingly purpose, and he lets it go at that. He just says, based on my science, it evolves, et cetera, but he doesn't go into all this poppycock, which
Yeah.
Dawkins, boy, he goes out of his way to make God, who doesn't exist. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Since he doesn't exist, again, not to repeat myself, but he goes through a tremendous amount of wordage and verbiage, I should say, and words to describe somebody that doesn't exist, which I think makes him look kind of stupid, but that's just my opinion. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, he's what's your definition of stupid and ignorance? Or stupid and ignorance, not together but separate.
Well, ignorance to me is simply not being aware of something, never being educated, never being exposed to something. Stupid is being exposed to it, but still choosing something that makes no sense.
Yeah.
And
That's a very
I'd go
good
one.
answer.
I'd go one step further. Repeating it just reinforces it. So if one makes the same bad choice again after learning it wasn't a good choice the first time, obviously that makes him more stupid. I don't know. There's another atheist I want to talk about, Charles Templeton. And he wrote a book called Farewell to God, My Reasons for Rejecting the Christian Faith. And now this is a quote from him. I just, again, can't make this stuff up. The God of the Old Testament is utterly unlike the God believed in by most practicing Christians. His justice is, by modern standards, outrageous. He is biased, quarrelsome, vindictive, and jealous of his prerogatives. Well, very much along the lines of Dawkins, if you can't say something good, be sure to say something bad. I mean,
Sounds
it's
like today's political world.
well, and it's what's really kind of interesting. Funny you should say that about political world. I was in Bible study this morning. We were talking a little bit, but the number one religion today is me,
Yeah.
me, ego, believing in myself, whatever I want, and that's the number one religion. And so when you get into all this stuff, I look at politicians, and I'm not slighting any of these, but if you ever read an article about what they're talking about, it's got more eyes in it than it does anything else. I mean, it's just loaded, and it's like, wait a minute, what about? I mean, it's all about them, and it's. I guess you have to just be that way, and that's the way it works. But this Templeton kind of reinforces how atheists are extremely, I guess you'd say, bitter, but I don't criticize him for that, because if you don't believe in anything and nothing has any purpose, wouldn't you end up being bitter? I mean, how would you be happy if nothing has a purpose, no hope of anything existing beyond yourself, beyond here? It'd be a pretty empty life, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you're describing me before Jesus came into my life. I was just angry at everything and
I was
saw
hoping
no reason except for furthering me. And
I was hoping you'd jump in on that, and I thank you for that. It was a gamble on my part. Now, I gotta keep going. We're gonna get to point counterpoint here. So right now, I'm just pointing out what some of these guys are saying. So this is like an agnostic, Robert Anton Wilson, and he said the Bible tells us to be like God, and then on page after page, it describes God as a mass murderer. Now, again, it's, to me, that kind of sounds like taking things out of context a little bit. That's just my opinion on that. But it does show how, if you're looking a certain way at something, it's funny how that can be filled that way. In other words, if you want to make God look bad, you can certainly look at it that way, but you have to start out wanting to make it that way, because that certainly is a twist on things. Now, what about Nietzsche? Nietzsche's that crazy German philosopher. I mean, a brilliant person, but he was an atheist, but he's also a nihilist. And he said nihilism appears because one has to come to mistrust any meaning in suffering, indeed in existence. It now seems as if there is no meaning at all in existence, as if everything were in vain. Now that goes very much back. Nietzsche lived a couple generations ago, centuries ago. But again, we're back to what Harari is saying, and Dawkins, that basically there's no meaning, no purpose in life, which you see kind of a theme here. There's no purpose, no meaning. Now there's a nihilist named Albert Camus. He said, I'm filled with the desire for clarity and meaning within a world and condition that offers neither. He calls this paradox the absurd, the idea that the universal human experience is negated by the meaninglessness of reality. Now, again, no meaning, no purpose. There's a theme here, and that's what I'm trying to bring home. That's why I'm reading these quotes, because you can read all their books and everything, but we want to, this is like making tomato sauce. You've got to process it. You got to get rid of the liquid. You got to condense it. Well, I'm trying to condense it. And what I would say all this comes down to is these folks don't find any meaning in life, period. No purpose, no meaning. Don't know why they're here. They don't know. In my way of thinking, this thinking is untethered from reality. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't, to me, make sense.
Yeah.
And that's why they're on trial here, because quite frankly, what's your case? Our case is well documented on Christianity. He came, he conquered, he redeemed us, he did everything. It was prophesized thousands of years before. But let's go to one more. This guy's pretty well known by a lot of people, and his name is Jean-Paul Sartre. And he worked on a book called Nausea. And what's funny about this is he says life is an empty bubble floating in a sea of nothingness. Now that would make me nauseous right off the bat. So I think the book title, I applaud him. I think it's an absolutely wonderful title. But again, nothingness, meaninglessness, no purpose. What about this guy's famous, Bertrand Russell? Only on the firm foundation of unyielding despair can the soul's habitation henceforth be safely built. So, wow, that takes me to, almost starting to feel bad. I mean, gosh, I'll be glad to just get out of here. That is just a sad commentary on life. Really, commentary on him as a person. He's all these guys are smart. All these atheists are smart. They're not a dummy in the bunch. They got things I don't understand. They don't make sense to me.
Stephen Arts is my guest today, or I'm my co-host on this new program we've started here on the View From A Pew. And by the way, you can email me anytime you want, mac@theviewfromapew.com. I find that these people are the ultimate narcissist. In other words, if you follow that trail, then atheism is a mental illness, just like narcissism is. Narcissism.
Well, you can almost treat it that way. You can almost call it an addiction to themselves. I think it's a very strong case of focusing too much on oneself to the point no one has all the answers. In fact, one doesn't have a lot of answers. But if you rely on totally yourself for the answer, there's no way you're going to be anything but disappointed.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
Now, I want to tie something into this too. Now, most of you right now, I think, are probably thinking, and I'm just guessing, they say, well, I'm sure glad I don't do that. I'm sure glad I'm not an atheist or a nihilist or whatever, or maybe even agnostic. But what if I told you that many of you are and you may not realize it? And you say, well, that's a bold statement. So here's where my reasoning for this. And there's tenets of materialism. Materialism, and this is written by a Dr. Stephen Meyer. He's a Christian and a philosopher of science. So I'm not coming up with this on my own. But there's tenets of materialism. And you say, well, materialism, what does that mean? Well, materialism means that our whole life is based on what you can see, hold, have, possess, maneuver, manipulate, possess, expound. In other words, power, money, everything. That's all materialism. But in true materialism, number one, God doesn't exist. Now, I don't know. Does that sound like something we just talked about maybe?
Yeah.
You know, man arose gradually from lower animals by mindless, undirected processes. Doesn't that kind of sound like what Darwin was saying? And doesn't that sound kind of similar?
Yep.
Human beings have no intrinsic value. Well, if you're not made by God and you have nowhere to go, I guess we don't have a lot of value. I mean, that kind of sounds similar to an atheist, you know, doesn't it? Sound if you don't believe in anything?
Absolutely.
Free will
If you can't believe in anything but yourself, then that's the only thing you're going to care about.
Now, I'll go one step further. According to Mr. Meyer, it also means free will is an illusion. That means that we never were given free will, that we really don't have much say. We're just here. So we don't even have free will. Think of that. We just kind of float through life like that bubble, like the nausea, empty bubble floating in a sea of nothingness.
Yep.
Man, talk about a lonely. Life has no ultimate purpose. Hey, Darwin came up with that right off the bat. And when we die, we rot. We don't go anywhere. We don't have any future. This is it. So materialism means you better get it now because you're not going to get it tomorrow. And after you're gone, you're done, you know? And so even though I'm not really, the subject is on materialism, I brought this in only because I think we're not as far away from atheism sometimes as we might think we are. We might think we believe in a God and, you know, we're not going to go pray to him and we're not going to go to church and we're not going to, you know, we're going to see nature and that's going to be our existence and that's all well and good. And I'll try to treat people as good as they treat me. Does that sound reasonable? As good as they treat me? Not better.
Not better.
No, just as good as they treat me. An eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. You could say you even believe in the Old Testament.
Yep.
But does that mean you're going down the road of a Christian or of a person that would be proposing that there's a life after? Not so much. So I just want to throw that out there to challenge everyone to think before you throw too many rocks, examine your own life. Certainly, and I say this respectfully, especially Mac. I mean, God, he's been materialistic most of his life, and I'm right behind him. So we are not talking about something we have no knowledge of. We're talking from experience.
How long have you had a relationship with Jesus?
It's hard to tell. I mean, mine is more subtle. I was trying to along the way, but then things kind of got in the way, and then I kind of put it back burner. I'd kind of go in and out.
Well, see, I was the worst because I believed in God, but I would literally say on the radio, I don't need no stinking Jesus. If I got the Father, why do I need the Son? And so I was actually committing the only unforgivable sin, and that's blasphemy. And I would have told you that me and God were like this. I'm doing that finger crossing thing. And that I had a clear path to salvation.
Well, what saved you, though, and Christians out there, you would back me up on this, that the one sin that can't be forgiven is we call out the Holy Spirit against the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
You can scream at God or at Jesus. You can complain. In fact, I think if you lose a lost one, expressing his anger, your anger, disappointment, frustration, that's all acceptable. But don't call out the Spirit and say, Spirit, you're no good. You're never going to be anything to me, because that goes a bit too far. Why? Because then you're rejecting the very essence of Christianity, the very essence of goodness. You go beyond, and the Holy Spirit's within us. So you're rejecting God within you then. Now, in fairness, we've got to talk about some former atheists. These former atheists kind of explain a little bit to help us understand what might have happened change their mind. So one of them is Cyril Joad, an English philosopher. And he was very much along the lines of Darwin and Hawkins, very much saying, basically, we're going to evolve into a higher being. We're going to just become our own gods, if you will. What do you imagine Mac changed his life? What can you imagine?
Well, Jesus.
And how did he enter it? Well, a lot of people.
This is a good story.
Well, a lot of people really don't understand why things happen to them the way they do, especially bad, right?
Yep.
So guess what? He was in World War II, and he learned a valuable lesson, and he had a tough time in it, that a life without God isn't worth living. And that's what changed. When Paul was knocked off his horse, he wasn't a Christian at that point. He was anything but. But it's funny what you can do when you get people's attention the hard way. And so World War II changed this man. Now, another former atheist, Irish theologian. Now, think of that, an Irish theologian. Just the idea of those two together is somewhat overwhelming. I mean, really. And anyway, I'm not making fun of the Irish, but I mean, it's just amazing. But Christianity, he said, offers a worldview that leads to the generation of moral values and ideals that are able to give moral meaning and dignity to our existence. Now, did you notice the key word here is, well, moral is important, value is important, ideal is important, all of them important, but meaning. He said it gives moral meaning and dignity. There isn't an atheist on earth that doesn't want his dignity. There isn't anybody that doesn't want his dignity. If you have dignity, though, doesn't it mean there's some meaning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of catch you in a, it's kind of a catch-22 there. But anyway, another one, Lee Strobel.
Yeah. Now he's alive.
Yeah.
His story just happened 20 years ago, or maybe less.
Yeah.
He was a journalist who went out to prove that Jesus did not exist.
Yeah.
So he studied the Bible.
Yeah.
And guess what happened? Holy Spirit came knocking. Hey, Lee, it's Jesus. I'm here. See, I'm real. And then his wife did the same thing, and now they're both amazing Christians.
Well, and here's something he wrote that kind of hits home. He says, if your friend is sick and dying, the most important thing he wants is not an explanation. He wants you to sit with him. He's terrified of being alone more than anything else.
Yep.
So God has not left us alone. He says also, I don't know what the future holds, but I do know who holds my future. He came to realize that without God, being in a loneliness pit was not where he wanted to be. He came to the realization that didn't make sense, and he wanted better.
Yep.
He didn't reject his life. He just wanted a new life. He wanted a better life, a fuller life, one with meaning, one with a future, one where he could have something that isn't here, totally non-materialistic. Because materialistic, look at it this way. If it's not Christianity and they're telling you about what heaven's going to be, more of the same here, you ever hear that?
Oh, yeah.
More virgins, more all this stuff. Well, who in the heck would want that, first of all? Really? I mean, if all we got is all we're going to get, more of the same, and it's forever, well, you talk about boring. We're going to have to give a whole new meaning to boring then, because that's going to get boring.
Steve Arts is my co-host today. We're talking about atheism and putting it on trial. I like the way you started the show by saying we as Christians are always having to defend ourselves with atheists. So what we've done today is Stephen did some amazing research and came up with all these atheists and what they stand for. And one thing you're reminding me of here, if you think about Christians, and obviously this isn't all of them, but it's also not the minority.
Right.
We're not seeking control.
No, we're not.
We've surrendered control to God because we realize that if we're in control, God is never on the top.
Well, that's right. And also, anybody that's been in control, anybody that's humble, that's been in control, realizes that's one of the loneliest places to be. And one other former atheist I want to mention is Richard Morgan. Now, this hits home in many ways, and I think this is a summary sentence that truly hits home. Science and philosophy do not have all the answers, not the answers to everything. And that tells you a lot, because everybody I mentioned, where were they? Where their background? Either in education or in science.
Yeah.
Philosophy or science. But basically what he's saying. And so the answers we seek are not here. The answers we seek are beyond us. And that's what he's acknowledging. And he made the ground. He knows what it's like not to believe.
Stephen Arts is my co-host today. We are talking about putting atheism on trial. And one of the things that you did that I thought was pretty cool is you actually went to artificial intelligence and asked them, is there a God?
Yeah, this is Google. Yeah, this is Google AI, guys. And I challenge you to all do this. Just say, hey, Google, or however you want to refer to him. Yeah, but say, is there a God?
Yeah, is there a God?
And I actually went to Chat GPT. I went a step further to get into the AI for sure. I went to Chat GPT, and it says the universe had a beginning, and it is in fact that God exists. It is a fact that God exists. I'm repeating that. It concludes it is a fact, not a belief. It's a fact. Because AI isn't about beliefs. It's about facts.
Right.
It is a fact that God believes. Now, that God exists, to me, that's a step beyond a belief.
Well, and then, if I can read ahead for you, and then it dives into not just God, but Christianity. And every spirit who doesn't confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is not of God, and this is the spirit of the Antichrist, to whom you have heard that it comes. Now it is in the world already. And Chad actually got that from 1 John.
Yeah, it's kind of last session we talked a little bit about the compass and which way you're pointing. Are you pointing towards God? And basically, it's kind of like football, really. You're either playing offense, and by the way, that's one thing I was really thinking about, because I kind of like to follow football. But I was thinking we just got to play offense and defense. We can't play just one. Whenever somebody's trying to put you in just one, it's not a fair game.
Right.
You've got to have offense and defense. And so what we're saying here is, if you're on the offense, you can't be on the defense at the same time.
Well, and there's no hypocrisy.
Yeah, and
you can't play by a different set of rules than you're allowing your opponent to do.
I love what Dr. Peter Kreeft said. He's an American philosopher. He's an American professor of philosophy at Boston College, and he stated, I just love the way he said this, not because I'm against atheism, although I am, but just the way it makes sense. He says, atheism cheapens everything it touches. Look at the results of communism, the most powerful form of atheism on earth.
Yep.
I remember reading the way the Russians were teaching the kids was they'd have the kids ask God, pray for an ice cream cone, and they'd make them pray at whatever for 4 hours. And then they say, ask us, ask your supreme whatever. And then they bring them ice cream. We are your God.
Yeah.
We are who you need to listen to.
Yeah.
And I thought, for me, that would have worked. I mean, I like ice cream really good, and that would have influenced me a great deal. I think eventually, though, that's got to wear off. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of things in life besides the ice cream cone. But nevertheless, that idea of trying to make us God on earth, that's kind of what all these doing. Speaking of Russia, Dostoevsky was a famous Russian novelist, and he said, everything is permitted. After all, blind, pitiless indifference, as Dawkins described it, doesn't give birth to morality. It only gives birth to chaos. What he was saying, if you have no cause, you have no purpose, you have nobody involved, you end up with chaos. And that's what the only thing you can end up with, which is what's happened every time you see any regime change where there's totalitarianism and they try to take over. It's usually due to chaos first, because everybody's giving up the faith, giving up working, don't want to work together. Everybody's a porcupine at odds with each other. And I mean, then we end up in chaos. That's right now in our country. If all our cities would collapse and we all had chaos, if we don't uphold laws, and I'm not getting political here, but frankly, we'd end up going to a totalitarian just to put order back. You know? So it's truly, these guys have been behind the curtain, if you will, Iron Curtain, and they know what this is like.
Yeah. All right. Now, but before we wrap up today, I want you to also share with us the research you found on what former atheists.
Well,
said.
these were the former.
Those.
But
Oh yeah, you're right. Sorry.
But what we can talk about is now some famous people and what they say about this whole thing. And G.K. Chesterton is one of those, English author and philosopher. He lived from 1887 or 75 rather than 1936. But he wrote, "The secularists have not wrecked divine things, but the secularists have wrecked secular things, if that is any comfort to them." So in other words, they have no record to go on. If you're going to go on destruction and that's going to lead you somewhere, it all it does is destroy. It doesn't build. John Adams, that happens to be a name, former president of the United States. He
signed the Declaration of Independence.
He did a lot of things. And the general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. Now, right as we speak, that's being challenged. As we speak, there's people in our government saying that, no, we didn't give you rights. I mean, God didn't give you rights. The government gave you rights. That's happening right now. And so, again, we're not that far removed from some of this. Another guy, Os Guinness, the great Christian thinker and author, wrote a book called A Free People Suicide. And this is one of the more interesting thoughts. One cannot point to a free and lasting civilization anywhere in history that was built on atheistic foundations, period. Because atheism doesn't build. It only tears down. It can't build. You can't build on nothing. It can't happen. You got to have something. You got to have a rock. You got to have something. And so where are we at today? I just want to kind of bring that up. You know where you're at, Mac. You're sitting in a studio. You're either here or you're on some beach enjoying yourself. But ultimately, we here in America, we either in a revival or ruin. The needle never stands still, and that's my concern of bringing this up. All this stuff that we're talking about, I'm concerned about what we do here as well as elsewhere in the world. I think that's really important. And then let's just one other thing here too. I mean, Joseph Pierce is a writer, and he summed up something beautifully. Now, C.S. Lewis is an extraordinarily famous person, an extraordinary writer, Christian, but I just think this is somebody interpreting all the books of his in one sentence. And I think he did a really good job. This Pierce said, "The great fruit of C.S. Lewis' clarity is, in sum, that he shows his readers that the great truths are knowable through the application of pure and simple common sense. The truths of faith and reason make sense because they are eminently sensible." In other words, if it sounds like it makes sense, maybe it just plain does. And sometimes what clearly is clearly is. So sometimes, to put in perspective, if somebody's trying to make you question everything, why let them? Why let somebody try to teach you that your life is meaningless? Why let anybody say to you that it has no purpose? Why let anybody? It's your choice. And yes, free will is alive and well. You can choose.
Well, it kind of goes back to that saying that says, what other people think of me is none of my business.
Well, yes, except I think of you, and sometimes that might be your business, some of the things.
No, I won't let it be.
Okay, well, see, that's a good attitude, because he's got a firm mind where he stands.
Well, and that doesn't mean I know everything. It means I admit I don't know everything. And the place that I go to get my answers that I don't have is the Bible. and other people like you, Steve, who have read the Bible and who understand the Bible and who still answer questions with, I don't know. That is my favorite question when I'm teaching a Bible class. Somebody asks something and I say, I don't know.
You know, I quote a lot of people here. Sometimes I will, sometimes I won't. But there is one other quote. A lot of you Christians probably read Jesus Calling by Sarah
Oh,
Young.
yeah.
It's a pretty popular book, and this is something I think makes a lot of sense. Once you're a believer, I mean, really believe, really turned over your life, and you're really humble about it. I mean, you accept that you are weak and Jesus is strong. That's how you know. And here's what she said, when you depend on Jesus continually, your whole perspective changes. You see miracles happening all around, while others see natural occurrences and coincidences.
Yeah.
Can't say that very well. And I think that's true, you know, and you say, oh, well, it's a matter of faith. And unless you get to that point, and it's only when you actually believe that you're helpless without God, really helpless without God. Doesn't mean you can't do something, but it means you're never going to conquer anything without his help.
Before we move on, I looked up some of C.S. Lewis's sayings or writings, and I think one of my favorite is probably one of the most simple, and that is Jesus was either a liar, a lunatic, or our Lord.
I can think of a lot of guys that I'd put those first two.
Absolutely.
But you can't put
I resemble
Jesus.
that remark.
Yeah, but you can't do that with Jesus at that last one.
And I don't know if you know the story about C.S. Lewis. He was not a believer. He is one of those people that converted over. And he got on the back of his brother's motorcycle. You've heard this story, I know.
Yes.
And they left
Yes.
their house. By the time they got to the pub, however far that was, C.S. Lewis had been given the gift of the Holy Spirit, and everything changed. And that was he wrote the Screw Tape Letters. He wrote so many wonderful books.
You remember what happened, though, in that motorcycle ride? Wasn't he injured badly or something coming along? What happened?
That I don't know.
That's something.
I'm not saying it's not, but
there is something that goes along with that, and I have to explore it because I read about it, but I don't remember the details. But yeah, miracles do happen, but the miracles that are really miracles are what happens within one's heart.
Yes.
Because only God can change that by you asking for his help. And in summary, what I would simply say to all atheists, or to any mankind, and I really believe this, without Jesus, there is nothing.
Yeah, and I'm always going back and reflecting on what my first 50 years were like, because they were unbelievable, great successes, terrible failures, terrible choices and decisions. But the one thing that I never realized was how much Jesus gives to your life. Everybody thinks, and I used to think this, if I'm a Christian, all this stuff goes away. Can't do this, can't do this, can't do it. I don't want to be a Christian. That'd be no fun. Well, Jesus doesn't take anything away. He gives to you the hearts of his desire, the desire of his heart, not mine. And he's my creator. I would much rather have what my creator designed for me or how much I have to pay for what I think.
Yeah, it's kind of like having a friend and going hand in hand, or we've seen footprints in the sand where he's carrying you, and it's more like, how do you handle life? I mean, number one problem in life today is coping, and it's a lot easier to cope if Jesus is with you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Steve and I go to the same church, and we've just started a 5-week series, and it's called How to Get Along with Porcupines. And the whole thing is how to deal with difficult people. Because if we can learn how to deal with people who we find difficult, now, I did not say deal with difficult people. I said people that we find to be difficult to deal with, then we'll solve our own problems.
The porcupine represents mankind today, and that is we're all individually walking around, kind of being isolated by own choice in some case. And, it's a pretty lousy existence. The poor porcupines, they can't get too close to each other because they poke each other, and actually been showing that they will die in cold weather when they can't huddle together. But we don't have to be that way. We can overcome that and, have forgiveness and actually be able to overcome our obstacles. But it's our choice.
Here's my favorite C.S. Lewis quote, and I have to look it up to be able to do it proper word by word. Christianity, if false, is of no importance. And if it's true, it's of infinite importance. The only thing it cannot be is moderately important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. All right, Steve. Steve Arts has been my co-host on this. We'll be back next Tuesday. And pray tell, what are we going to talk about next week when it comes to atheism?
Well,
Or are we going to get off the topic?
we're not going to talk about atheism.
Okay.
I mean, I think we've covered that well enough. But what I do want to introduce is a 3-letter word that's extremely ridiculed today. And you shouldn't say it. A lot of us have been brought up thinking 4-letter words, but the secular world said this is a 3-letter word you must not talk about, and it's called sin.
Yep.
And that's what we're going to talk about.
Yep. There are pastors today, and I'm not thinking of anyone in particular, but there are pastors who on my show have said before, I try not to talk about sin. I try not to talk about sin. I once had a guy who owned a Christian radio station that I was on for a few years tell me to stop talking about Jesus and stop talking about forgiveness. There's got to be more to Christianity than that. And shortly after he told me that, I left, because that is the basis of Christianity, forgiveness. And how do we get forgiveness? Because Jesus died on the cross, so he would have us for eternity. Otherwise, he couldn't be with us. He couldn't bring us home because we were sinful and didn't know it and didn't repent and didn't ask permission and didn't ask for thankfulness and didn't ask for forgiveness.
Mac, watch your blood pressure. Don't get worked up.
I know. Thanks. All right, that is going to be our show for today, and I sure appreciate you listening. We do this every Tuesday and all week long on your Facebook or your social media. You'll find our shows. They're podcasts as well as videocasts. And as always, they're all brought to you by Divine Truth Christian Stores. Thanks for listening. Love this job. Can't do it without you. On the View From A Pew.
Divine Truth Christian Store, where you'll find more.